This is the Transfer Planning Committee.
Oh,
Testing.
You're all sitting there very quietly. Oh, sorry. So welcome to the afternoon session of the Planning Development Control Committee. We start with agenda item 10, but just a quick reminder that councillors who will be voting on the application are sitting either side of the table. I'm Therese Evans, I'm the chair of the committee, and my vice chair is Councillor Jane Rotter. And then we also have officers, chief, I know you told me this morning, but yes, planning manager Lorna Hutchins, our legal representative, Daniel Lucas, Julie Pinnock, service lead for the built environment, and Claire Buchanan, who is taking the minutes and will sort out any problems that you have. And the case officer always sits in this seat, and for the first item, it's not what you have on your report, but it is Sean Quigley. And just a reminder that mobile phones should either be on silent or switched off. We're not expecting a practice fire drill, so if you hear the fire drill, it is for real. The assembly point is down in Abbey Gardens. Please follow the instructions of the fire officer who will appear, and please do not use the lift. And just a reminder that this is being live streamed and will remain on the council's website, YouTube website, for a while. I don't know how long it will be there, but it certainly will be there for a while. So we move to the first item, agenda item 10, 21/01538/FUL, and there's amended plans, change of the use of land from agriculture to equestrian, and erection of a stable building, hard standing, and construction of a manege. And this is at Lower Puddock, Bent Lane, Hambledon, obviously Hampshire, and it's in Soberton Parish Council's ward. Sean, when you're ready, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Could I start with a verbal update? I noticed that the committee report condition 2, which specifies the plans associated with this development, hasn't got any plan numbers. So I would seek authority from you to insert those plan numbers into that should the application be approved. Great.
To say yes, no?
Yes,
Yes,
that'd be great. Thank you.
You have permission.
Thank you. So as you said, this is a planning application for change of use of land from agriculture to an equestrian use, which includes the erection of a stable building, hard standing, and the construction of a manege. As you've said, this site is in the countryside, in a rural area off Bent Lane. We're approximately 2 kilometres northwest of Denmead.
Sorry, Chair, the image wasn't on the live stream, so we just need to check that.
So there's a plan of the site outlined in red, a wider site to the south and west of land also in the control of the applicant. There's the site plan as existing, showing the application site slightly sort of coloured. That's the area of existing hard standing. Some photographs of that hard standing and of the margins of the field in the bottom right as it abuts Bent Lane. Site plan as proposed is showing the majority of the area proposed to be turned into a manege, and the remainder of the site shown as a hard standing and a stable building directly adjacent to Bent Lane. Stuck again. There we go. That's a detailed drawing of the fence surrounding the manege and the manege itself. And there's some drawings of the proposed stable building, building of approximately 7 metres by 5 metres by nearly 4 metres. And the application is recommended for approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one public speaker who is a supporter and the applicant, and that's Tommy Maloney. I'm sorry, do you don't want to speak? No. Okay. Thank you. We'll move then to our report, which starts on, sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. On page 117, and principle of development. Any questions on principle of development? If not, we move on to impact on the character and appearance of the area. Councillor Rutter.
Thank you, Chair. There's some concern about the extensive hard standing area and whether it's going to be reduced in size. I think it was put up without proper planning permission, and there's some concern of the local residents about that. Could you reassure us about the where exactly the hard standing is going to be? And also there's a question of where the manure is going to go, and I can't quite see it on the report. If you could just remind me where it is, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the plan we've got on the screen at the moment shows the hatched area is the proposed hard standing area, which is, in comparison to what is there at the moment, a much more extensive hard standing area. So this represents a reduction in that area. Background, you're probably aware of also there's outstanding enforcement action which is actively progressed, which requires the removal of all hard standing apart from what we might permit today. And I'm not familiar with the arrangements for the manure, Chair.
That is a concern of residents, I think, where it's going to be stored, particularly since all that around the stable is hard standing. And can you just tell me about the surface for the menage, please? Manage, whichever it is. Manage.
As I understand it, Chair, it's a conventional construction. The bed is of loose rubber and other materials. So it's a standard menage construction with fencing, quite sort of subtle fencing around it, which is the norm. If I could go back to the previous question, I've been reminded that condition 5 requires that the details of the manure arrangements need to be submitted. So were you to permit that, we
Yeah, sorry, I was looking in the body of the report and forgot to look in the conditions. Yes. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask about the hard standing, because I believe when it went to appeal, it was the inspector's request. Has the applicant removed the hard standing?
As I understand it, no, not as yet. But as I say, it is being actively pursued in our enforcement team.
So could someone give me advice? Is that a separate issue to this application?
That's fine, Chair. So where there's an inconsistency between the planning permission, which is now agreed, well, should you approve it, will agree some of the hard standing. Where that isn't consistent with where the hard standing is not approved, the enforcement notice will still bite. So we will be able to continue to pursue compliance with that enforcement notice. Now we've won the appeal on that.
And we haven't put that in the conditions?
There wouldn't be a need to, yeah, because it's covered by the appeal and the enforcement notice.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, followed by Councillor Lamy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are a couple of questions I'd like to ask. The first, I'm uncertain as to how many boxes there are in these stables. On page 131, it suggests only 2. Now, if one of these for hay store, that implies that suggests there's only going to be 1 horse. So are we talking about a family stables, i.e. no more than 4 or 5? Because in your report, there is a suggestion horses may occasionally be for hire, which is suggests that this stabling is going to be expanded sometime. I know we can't predict the future, so don't tell me that, Sean. I know that, but it's an anomaly in your report. The other one is, as you say, the manure stands. This piece of land, I know it well. It's right on the edge of my ward, and Councillor Reid is literally on the other side of the lane from me, from where this site is. And this is a pretty damp bit of land. In fact, the ancient woodland may be best described sometimes as a muskeg swamp. This is improved grassland, you suggest, which would involve, I presume, some form of drainage. Am I correct in all of this? First, how big are these stables going to be? Secondly, you've already mentioned the manure disposal. And the third thing, where is the hay store and the tack room? Are we talking about 4, 5, 6, 7 loose boxes for horses? Or what? How many horses are we talking about?
On the first question, this application is for the private use of horses.
Right.
So as you've recognised, you know, we could speculate about what might happen in the future, but the application is for someone to have private use of horses. So that's what we would consider today. That's what you would consider today.
Sure.
I've gone back to the drawing of the stable, so that gives the extent of the proposed built development. And I think I'm right in saying we don't necessarily control the number of horses, but I think it would be determined by the nature of what you would approve today if you approve this in terms of the stable buildings.
But we can lay down as to whether these horses can be used for hire or not, can't we?
Well, the permission would be for the private use of the horses.
Right.
If that changed, that would perhaps be something that would require planning permission, and then you would.
So we get to a grey area, isn't it? Is it? We say private use. Is it private use for a family, one family, or private use? Oh yes, you can borrow my horse.
Well, I'm taking it that the people who have applied are intending to use the horses for their own use.
Sure. Okay. Thanks a lot.
And finally the manure managing is covered by conditions. So we're asking for details to be submitted, which we would then approve.
And you said it's a problem with the muck disposal hasn't been dealt with yet, because this certainly just down the lane, lane about 4 meters wide at this point, is pretty damp. Now, clearly, how you store that muck before disposal is going to be important. Otherwise, you're going to get pollution of the groundwater. So how is that being dealt with?
Well, I think that'll be dealt with when we assess the details that come in for those arrangements. That would be in our minds, certainly, and certainly now you've brought our attention to it.
And Councillor Pearson, condition 6 says it has to be for private purposes only. So Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. One is about the hedgerows that the inspector wanted replaced. How's that going to be tackled? That's an important issue. And the second thing is that the field next to it, I presume, is going to be used for grazing. Are we controlling the number of horses, whether they're going to be just for the family or they'll be able to rent the grazing out?
On the first question, the boundary of the site with Bent Lane has an existing access which is very wide. The appeal decision on the previous application, which the council won the appeal, required that access to be narrowed down from 10 metres to 3 metres, with the intervening hedges up to there being augmented with new planting, and that's a condition of this application should you permit it. And that 3 metre gap would be filled with a 5-bar gate. So as a result of this application, the situation of the access and the vegetative cover on Bent Lane is much improved. I've forgotten the second question.
The second question was, in the field that we're looking at next to the Menard, is that going to be available for people to rent to graze their horses, or is that conditioned in that that's only for
Well,
private?
that part of the site isn't part of this application.
So in other words, the two horse stables could be used for storing food and that, and not used as stables as such, to augment the business of renting the fields out.
Well, the stable elevations show a loose box and storage, so the building is split into two, which are, relatively modest, I would think.
Yeah, the reason I asked that was because horses are herd animals and they prefer to be with other horses, and we've got to be careful on that.
Thank you. I'm sorry to keep on the same point, but the inspector, not only did he want the hard standing to be removed, which hasn't been removed, but he also wanted the replanting of hedges. And so I was looking at the conditions, and I can't see a condition that says that you've got to, or is that all part of the enforcement case? Because condition 3 just says retain the existing boundary hedgerows and enhance, but it doesn't say that they're going to replace the one that they took down, the hedging. Is that part of the enforcement?
That is part of the enforcement action, yes, Chair, because the appeal inspector requires the 10-metre access to be reduced to 3. Those extra areas that are reduced will be planted and filled with a 3-bar gate. So this requires additional planting in the hedgerow with Bent Lane, and the ongoing enforcement action will result in the reduction of the wide access into a much more modest access with a 5-bar gate.
Okay, it is a pity that none of the inspector's requests have been fulfilled before another application has come in. There we go. Any more questions? Can we move then on to, well, National Park? Don't think there'll be any questions about that. Historic environment and neighbouring amenities. Any questions there? Sustainable transport and ecology and biodiversity. Any questions there? Can I just check that we have conditions on biodiversity net gain, or I know it's not statutory at the moment, but it will be. But I can't see any conditions encouraging wildlife. And
what I can point to, Chair, is condition 3, which requires the enhancement of planting on the boundaries, including that with Bent Lane, and the ecological impact assessment that is mentioned there, Windrush Ecology, sets out the planting, that the enhanced planting that is required, which will be native species, and in that way that will be an ecological enhancement.
yes, but I'm concerned about the hedgerow which disappeared in February to March 2020, because that would have been of high ecological value, it says here, at the site level, and of ecological value at the local level. I'm not sure that I'm satisfied that the hedgerows restoration is adequate. Want to comment on that, Sean?
Well, I think I've already pointed out that the aspect of that, Chair, that will result from the approval of this application. There's also the active enforcement action, which again requires additional planting, particularly on the access with Bent Lane. My understanding is that enhanced planting on the boundaries is very important because it links with the very valuable ecological ancient woodland and sinks nearby, not affected by this development. However, that enhanced planting is very important for links through and between those areas.
Okay, anything else on that section? Councillor Cunningham?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to reinforce your point about the previous hedgerow which was removed, would it not, on the basis of what Sean has just said, be advisable to refine condition 3 so that it makes it absolutely clear that the reinstatement of the hedgerow has to be done prior to the use commencing of this course?
I'd suggest if you're going to keep the animals into a field, you need a field boundary. And the hedge as it was wouldn't keep a badger out, let alone a horse, or in this case. So I would have thought Mr. Malone is going to have to improve that boundary. We would prefer a hedge, obviously, because that's what is there. So I would have thought it's very appropriate to have some condition, because it would support Mr. Malone's case of keeping horses in that field. Otherwise, they're getting out, and have horses wandering down that lane would be quite dangerous. Because, as I say, it's only about 4 meters wide. That
Good.
helps.
Can I have some officer advice here on?
Chair, I'm just having a look to see what the landscaping plan that's in the ecological assessment report actually sets out, so we can see where that is currently proposed. It may well include additional planting where the removed hedges were, but there's no harm in reiterating that requirement because it's something that has to be done anyway, just to be clear. But in order to do that with the condition, we do have to be quite precise about where that is, so we can write a condition to put into the recommendation. But because we believe, or we know that it's the replacement planting for the new access to narrow that back down again.
So given that probably the committee agree with enhanced vegetation and protection, do you? Yeah. Shall we, if this is approved, leave that for the agreement between me and the officers? As we need to be precise.
Yes, as part of the recommendation, we can delegate the wording of that condition to ensure that the removed hedgerow or details are submitted to us to ensure the adequate replanting of it and future retention of it.
And me.
Yeah, delegated back to us in liaison with yourself.
Yeah. So that's condition 3, is it?
Yes, yes.
Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if Mr. Quigley or perhaps legal advisors could clarify.
Sorry, Councillor Edwards, could you just move your microphone a bit nearer or speak a bit louder or
Sorry.
whichever? Yeah.
Yes, I'd be grateful if Mr. Quigley or our legal advisors could explain to me. We're talking about making a condition of this application the reinstatement of hedgerow. Now, the hedgerow reinstatement was one of the things required by the inspector's decision, along with removal of hard standing and reinstating the field, which might also be seen to be necessary for the current application for equestrian use to be implemented. So why are we focusing on the hedgerow, but not expressing the requirements relating to this application for the hard standing and the field itself?
I thought that perhaps Lorna covered that, but you can cover it again.
If I just cover the point about the hard standing, it's actually shown on the layout plan. the extent of the hard standing that members can consider to approve today, in which case we would expect this development to be carried out in accordance with that plan, and it would be in breach of the planning permission if they didn't, in which case we can again take enforcement action. So that isn't necessary as a sort of as a condition as such, because it's part of the approved plans. I'm just having a quick look at the ecology plan to see if actually the replaced hedgerow is part of a plan that might be subject to approval today. But notwithstanding that, we did just agree that we could delegate a condition back to the chairman with myself as well to write that. So you've got plans, you've got conditions, and the two we're making sure are consistent, and both the enforcement notice can bite where there's parts of the development that is on the site already that has not been complied with, which is different than what then might be on the site already that would be approved through this planning application. So there's like an overlap. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, councillor Edwards. Yeah. I mean, enforcement is a separate issue, isn't it? So it's complicated because it's illegal.
It's like a secondary or a second regime in the planning with different sort of legislation, but it gives us the tools to enforce unlawful development and also lawful development as it's being developed. So they're pretty strong tools to allow us to control what is going to happen on this site.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of advice on this, please. In the previous application was for caravans on there. Can we ensure that there is a condition in the planning that doesn't allow for caravans to be parked there for any more than a few hours?
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that was reasonable, because caravans in themselves is not operational development, and so you can bring caravans onto a site without needing further planning permission. And then if they were lived in, then and it wasn't planning permission wasn't sought, then we can take enforcement action to remove the use and the caravan from the site. But what we would normally want to see in a planning permission is that there's adequate buildings to facilitate the needs of the users of this site when they are there, so that they don't bring additional I suppose temporary type structures onto the site, although we do know that does happen, but it's not sort of subject to this planning permission.
Yeah, the only reason I brought that up, Laura, was the fact that occasionally we get people wanting to put caravans on for restrooms on sites like this, and I want to make sure that we have conditioned that out.
So my recommendation is it's not really reasonable to do that, because it's not something that's normally in our control, and it's something that does happen across the district, where you do have these small equestrian uses that people will bring these types of structures onto site to facilitate that, and it's not something we have control of. So my recommendation is we don't attach a condition to that subject matter.
Okay, councillor Leeming. And so I think we've probably finished ecology and biodiversity. And so anything else in the rest of the report, including the conditions? No? So debate. It's always difficult, I would start then. It's always difficult to judge something when the applicant has been told to do something and hasn't done it. And so there's running alongside but separate an enforcement action. And what has happened is that some valuable ecological hedge has been removed. That's a pity, because it sort of indicates that you don't respect what the appeal inspector said and you're going to go ahead anyway. But we've been told by our officers that there is no reason, no material planning reasons to refuse this. So given that we are tightening up on the conditions, we've got the enforcement action running along at the same time. I don't see any other course of action for myself than approve this recommendation. Does anyone else want to comment? This application has been recommended for approval. Those in favour, that is with the planning numbers added to condition 2 and the rewording of condition 3. All those in favour of recognising the officer's recommendation and approving this application, please show. Those against? Thank you. And abstentions?
2, Chair.
Thank you. So that application is approved. So we'll move on to the next application. Do we need to change officer? Yeah, so it will be a short break while we just sort that out. Right, so we're moving on now to item 11, which is 22/02549/FUL. And this is the Cricketers Inn, Curdridge Lane, Curdridge, Hampshire. And a variation of condition 3, which is the external sound amplifying equipment, for the approved timber garden building. And there's an amended condition wording and amended proposal. And if you remember, councillors, we had this at committee fairly recently. So the case officer is Marge Ballinger, and when you're ready, Marge, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Chair, before Marge commences, I'm just going to give a quick verbal update further through the update sheet, though that's okay, on one of the conditions. So condition number 3 in respect to sound amplifying equipment. So we propose now that it reads sound amplifying equipment and musical instruments can only be installed or used within the garden building a maximum of 15 times a year. So to strike out the words or fixed to its north elevation, it's imprecise. The rest of the conditions shall read as proposed. So I'll hand over to Marge and you can ask any questions further to that issue.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Lorna. Can you just repeat what I have to strike out in condition 3?
It's all fixed to its north elevation. Just delete that last part of the sentence.
Thank you.
That's our recommendation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marge.
Right, Marge.
Thank you, Chair and Lorna. This is the site of the Cricketers Pub. This is an old Google map where it shows the parking in the front of the pub that's now been filled in as the garden building. The map demonstrates the wider area. You can see the neighbors' dwellings on the west as long as also on the north and the east sides. And this is at the intersection of Curd Ridge and Lawkins Lane. This is the approved site plan demonstrating the location of the garden building with its parking and the garden seating within the area forward of the original Cricketers Inn main pub building. And these are photos, or these are drawings of the approved seating for up to 36 people, timber clad building with slate roofs, and it's got an open-sided front. And it's just noted in the winter months, they've fitted the open sides with plastic sheeting. And that's just to be understood for the colder months. And the previous application had a few conditions. Just to note, I just wanted to review some of them. Condition 4 was regarding the external lighting of the garden building to approve in advance. This has not been discharged, but there are no plans to insert any external lighting on the garden building. Condition 6, the landscape plan has been approved and is demonstrated below. And condition 7 is still pending, and this was for suds and drainage detail. These are the site photos that were taken from March of 2022. And during a recent site visit, they still seem to apply. The pub is, the building is set back into the pub garden, and you can see the relationship of the dwelling on the west and the pub garden building and the location of the building in relation to the drive. These are more photos of the building in situ. And this slide demonstrates the relationship between the approved site plan and the neighbor adjacent. The approved plan does not demonstrate some of the recent extensions that Barron's Court has built. So I just want to demonstrate that the drawing on the left shows that there's a kitchen and a snug close to the boundary after removal of their garage. So that's what the relationship was when we approved the application. That's what the relationship was compared against. And just a refresher that there's only 5 meters between the garden building and the boundary to Barron's Court. These are photos showing the lane in between the garden building and the fence to Barron's Court. Photo 6 shows that lane. Photo 7 is a photo from inside the seating or the outdoor area looking back toward the garden building, which is seen behind the trees in the background of photo 7. And then photo 8 demonstrates the front of Barron's Court looking back to the garden building. And these are photos comparing relationship to other nearby dwellings. Further the lane north are dwellings, and you can see the lane here just north of the garden building in the distance. Number 10 is, photo 10 is Myrtle Cottage in relationship to the actual pub building. And then photo 11 shows Underwood, which is to the east of the parking area to the Cricketers. And this is a Section 73 application, which is to vary a condition that we have already approved in the previous application. Condition 3, don't know if I need to repeat it again, but you've read it a few times, but it's stated here where we noted different aspects of the condition for external no amplifying music instruments or equipment to be installed within or surrounding the garden building hereby approved, unless it's in accordance to a temporary events license granted. And this proposal is to amend the wording of this condition to what's written here. If you want me to read it, that's fine. But I just wanted to note that the sound amplifying equipment and musical instruments can only be installed or used within the garden building. What Lorna has stated that we're striking out or fixed to its north elevation a maximum of 15 times a year. And this comprises no more of 2 times within the same calendar month. And each time shall be no more than 24 hours for duration compliant with the hours of operation specified in condition 2. At no other time the use of sound amplifying equipment or musical instruments permitted within the garden building or the area surrounding the garden building. A register of dates and times of where sound amplifying equipment and musical instruments are used shall be kept by the pub management and shall be produced to the local planning authority upon reasonable notice if requested. And the building has been approved for retention in the 2022 application. So this is just to tighten up the wording of the condition from the previous application so that all the condition references planning law only. These just are additional photos taken recently just to show that the proposal is still as approved. The use and retention of the outbuilding for events was approved in the previous application. The application's amended condition 3 is considered to further control sound amplifying equipment within planning law. All other conditions, including hours of use of the outbuilding, will remain. And to conclude, the amended condition 3 controls amplifying equipment's use within planning law alone and does not allow the ambiguity that resulted with the previous sound condition. The addition of 3 more times of use, up from 12 to 15 times per year, received no objection from our environmental health officer. The proposed amended condition is not considered to create any further adverse impact upon residential amenities of neighbors compared to the previous condition's wording, but ensures further controls on the use of sound amplifying equipment with the garden building. The proposal is therefore in accordance with policies of the development plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move now to the public speaking, and we have 2 public speakers, 1 objector and 1 supporter. So objector, first of all, Mark Sennett. Good afternoon. Yes, yes, any of the mics, but yes, that's fine.
Thank you very much.
And you've already put it on, and you have 3 minutes. And when you're ready, please start. And
Thank you.
You'll see the clock countdown in front of you on the screen.
All right. Thank you. My name is Mark Sennett. I'm a planning consultant. I've been asked by a number of local residents to act on the behalf of respect to this application. It's clear to them that they currently suffer as a result of living in close proximity to the application site. A recent example of which was the presence of significant on-street parking over the Easter weekend, which created significant local congestion problems. And they note there are forthcoming events on the 6th and 13th of May and 10th of June. It's recognised that businesses should have the opportunity to operate and be successful. However, a balance has to be clearly drawn with the legitimate needs of local residents in order to protect their basic residential amenities. My clients are very concerned that the current proposals unacceptably and further erode their residential amenities in this regard. To allow for an external sound amplification equipment at the application site will create 2 primary issues that have increased on-street car parking and noise. Restrict to on-street car parking problems, increase the number of events, will lead to an increased congestion issues, and during these events, cars typically park partially on and damage the grass verge and create access problems on the road because it is a narrow road and has no pathway.
However, the issue of noise is more problematic, not least as neighbouring residents are subjected to noise when they're simply trying to enjoy their home and garden. They're currently subjected to noise, particularly bass noise, which is clearly more penetrative and disruptive as a result of ongoing events. To allow more events on site will make the existing situation even worse. The application is supported by noise assessment. That simply provides an assessment of ambient noise in respect of the previous application, in respect of the garden buildings. No assessment is made with regard to the impact of noise created by the external system. No reference is made within the application documents as to the level of noise local residents will be subjected to. The current application noise assessment has failed to allay any fears that impact with regard to noise can be adequately mitigated. My clients currently find the existing situation unacceptable in terms of harm to their residential communities, and therefore object to the current proposals, not least because it increases the number of events that can be accommodated on the site over the calendar year. Within this context, my clients simply do not understand why the applicant should be allowed to increase the number of significant events per year. Your officer report concludes by stating the increased number of events with external amplified music will create no adverse harm to the surrounding area or residential community, and the application is therefore considered to be acceptable. However, this is incorrect. The proposals will result in an increase in the number of significant events on site, and this will inevitably subject neighbours to additional noise and on-street car parking problems. In short, the immediate neighbours will have to suffer. Oh, well, please,
I have to stop you there.
Thank
you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
But members of the committee might want to ask you questions of clarification. Yeah. So are there any questions of clarification? Mr. Sennett, where do you live?
I don't live there. I'm acting for the local residents.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Right.
I'm a fan resident.
Councillor Rutter?
Yeah, can I ask you, is the problem of noise a general problem from the pub? Or is it specifically to do with events that have had loud or recorded music played outside?
As I understand the two issues, I think on Thursday nights there are events within the pub where music's being played, and that causes a nuisance to the local residents. And in addition, there are events that take place outside, and that also causes a nuisance. The nuisance is twofold. On larger events, then there's car parking issues, but they've also got the problem with noise. Just simply because they're very close to it.
Can I also ask if residents are in regular communication with the pub management about any issues?
I don't know if they are. No.
You don't. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. So thank you very much indeed for coming along today. So the other public speaker is the supporter and applicant, Stuart Downey. Are you both speaking?
Yeah, well, interested to answer.
So which one is Mr. Downey?
Me, yeah.
Right.
And this is Kieran, who's one of the partners in the pub.
Okay, right. So you're speaking,
I'll
Downey,
speak, yeah.
and then you're both answering questions if there are any.
If that's okay,
That's
yeah.
how it goes. Yeah. So when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm Stuart, the landlord of the Cricketers pub. Unfortunately, we have a planning consultant, Andrew Burgess, but he's not here today. He's in Wiltshire at a public inquiry. Andrew and I are pleased to see the application is recommended for approval and no objection from the Environmental Health Officer. It is important to recognise the garden building was granted for planning in 2022 June, and the planning consideration before you today relates entirely to the rewording of the planning condition and not the principle of the building. You have a detailed report from Marge, which sets out the planning considerations and the planning balance that you need to make. The wording for the new planning condition will allow sound amplified and musical instruments within the garden building for a maximum of 15 times a year and no more than twice in a calendar month. This will allow events to take place without temporary events notice and will We'll remove the TENS application to the licensing authority where there has been an overlap between planning and licensing. This approach reduces the administrative burden on myself and the council. As I explained to the committee in 2022, when the Cricketers Inn was taken on by 4 families who all live in Curdridge, we spent 6 months of the lockdown refurbishing the pub car park inside the pub and the beer garden. There was a total investment of £250,000. In January 2022, we made a further investment of £190,000 into the kitchen, and the garden building with pizza kitchen was a further £90,000. This is all a combined investment of over £500,000 to make this pub and restaurant trade to the capacity it can. Our efforts have recently paid off several awards in the South East Pub of the Year 2022, and we've just been voted by Green King, who have a portfolio of 3,000 pubs, the best garden space for 2023. We were in the Hampshire Chronicle on the 6th of April, and I'm on BBC Berkshire this Friday morning talking about the award. We are local people and manage the pub responsibility. We are committed to making this pub work as a business. We have a large front garden and benches and children's play equipment that the beer garden and front terrace provide an attractive, sunny and safe setting for families to eat and drink in during the good weather. The restaurant has developed a good reputation. We employ over 28 staff now, and when we took the pub on, we had 2 members of staff on 0-hour contracts. Many pubs are closing, but through our good management and providing a good offering for families, we are succeeding. Since taking over the pub, we've not only invested large sums of money, but we make a lot of effort into making this business success. Thank you for your support, and if you have any questions, I'm pleased to answer them. Please bear in mind I'm a publican, not a planning consultant.
Well timed, thank you. So councillors, have you any questions for Mr Downey? Councillor Rutter?
So I had a question about liaison between you as managers, operators of the pub and the immediate local residents. Does that communication happen? Can you tell me how you've tried to mitigate obviously playing loud music in your pub garden is going to affect your nearest neighbours. So how have you discussed things with them? Can you just tell me that? And did I read somewhere that previously, I think in one of the objections from the parish council, you'd had a verbal agreement that music would stop at 8 PM outside, and this new condition wants to go to 10 PM on Fridays and Saturdays. Is that right? And can I just ask, I think you're probably just a victim of your own success with the issue of parking. So to what extent do you try and mitigate parking on verges and around the village that's causing a problem for neighbours? Okay, thanks. I understand. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham?
Thank you, Chair. Have you thought about putting through a noise and acoustic audit testing system on your music? And also, have you experimented with a volume limiter on your?
Yeah, we had when we did the planning last time, we had a company when we did our biodiversity reports and our noise reports, and it was all approved last time we had it, but we haven't done it on an afternoon where there's been music night.
Don't forget, councillors, that we're just looking at the amended wording to condition, is it 3?
Right.
Yeah, on page 141. Councillor Reid, was it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. How many covers can you cater for on your outside entertainment area?
36 in the garden building.
And you've got the play area there as well.
Yeah.
I noticed on Sunday that the landscaping wasn't there. That's been agreed on June 22. At what point do you think you might well be able to put that landscaping in?
Kieran, I'm one of the directors that owns the limited company that owns the lease that obviously Stu operates. I'm here to say that behind the limited company, they've got it. Obviously, Green King own the lease, and we own the lease, the Green King. So along with the drainage and the landscape improvements, it's got to go through another layer of Green King, if we like, which is currently ongoing. But I can assure you the landscaping is next. The drainage, we're still about 2 months away from getting approval from our unapproved contractor to be approved to get it done faster than Green King can supply. So as we're in spring, the landscaping is due to be happening before the summer events kick in. But the drainage is still going to be about another 2 months away before we can connect the waste drainage up to the main drainage of the pub. That's between the limited company and Green King as a pub licensee.
Councillor Pearson?
Well, first, Stuart, congratulations on your awards. I read about them in the Chronicle as well. But I agree to a degree what Councillor Rutter just said. You're almost a victim to your own success. And why I'm saying that, and there is a question in here with this, the report we've got is that you're planning on audiences of up to 500 attendees. So the query is, how would you cater for parking in that situation? And secondly, your pub, one of its successes, in my opinion, I live in Swanmore, noise wouldn't affect me in Swanmore, bit too far, but this is a rural environment, a disseminated settlement. Don't you consider that people in that area have the right to quiet after 9 o'clock at night?
Absolutely agreed. We're not thinking about keeping it on till 10 o'clock at night. And actually, we've asked our local neighbours to work with us, and that's why we had the consultation in November to talk to them about it. There's no way on this earth that you could fit 500 people in the pub anyway, or in the pub garden. So some of the wording on the conditions and things and the TENS licenses, it's never going to happen there.
Which your application is about the amplified sound. And that, I would suggest, is what Kirkcudbright Parish Council, who represents the local community, are most concerned about. Amplified sound out of doors is certainly more than any householder in that area catered for when they bought those houses.
Yeah, like I said, we've got no plans to play music or heavy metal or rave music until 11:30 at night or 10 at night. We just want to be able to have, an afternoon where we can have an acoustic band in the garden on a Saturday afternoon when it's a bank holiday. The pub in the winter, that's never going to happen because the pub's not big enough.
well,
Just
people-
remind councillors that we're talking about the small building outside, or semi-outside, but we're not talking about the inside of the pub.
No, well, if they are up, I mean, the phraseology used in the report is less than 500 attendees. Well, that means, okay, less than 500 attendees is 499. That's being a bit silly, but you know, being pragmatic with respect, Chair. You know the pub. It's very quiet in that area.
I'm going to ask Lorna to clarify
Yeah.
now.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. The licensing regime and the planning regime are obviously two separate regimes, but through the conduct of our assessments, we are asked as good practice to try to sort of coordinate matters together where that's possible, but it's only for planning members to consider the planning considerations and the amenity issues, but also not of the whole site and the existing main pub building. This application is only for an amendment to that one smaller pizza oven building, the small timber building that you can see that's opposite the car park. That's all that we're asking members to consider, not matters of events across the whole site. The amendment is just the consideration of music or amplified sounds and musical instruments inside that building for a limited number of events as per the condition, and the striked out phrasing limits any external amplified equipment at this point. And that's where there's an inconsistency with the licensing regime and the planning regime. We can't make that align.
Going back at that, I would say it's not a question of sound, live music. It's the amplified sound, and that carries a great deal farther than the bounds of this site.
From the small building. Yeah. From the small building.
Well, it won't go as far as Swanmore, but
that's
all the
that's
houses
the
in this area.
application for us, councillor.
Sure, no, it's an odd application. Sorry, odd application about licensing coming before planning, and I got to say that puzzled me. I mean, to me, it should have been dealt by licensing. Now, I wouldn't try to second guess what the licensing committee would say about this. I'm puzzled why it's come to us. I've not, in the report, I don't see any reason other than the fact it was dealt with as conditions as the first application, which I supported.
Yes.
What worries me is.
So this site already has planning permission, and the application is to amend or vary condition 3.
Introduce amplified sound. That's the query.
But I'm going to go on because we're not going to agree. Yes, Marge.
I just wanted to clarify that the original condition says no sound amplifying equipment shall be installed or used within or surrounding the garden building hereby approved, including the use of musical instruments, unless this is in accordance to any temporary events licenses granted. So the spirit of the condition at the time was you could get up to 12 temporary events notices approved a year. So at the time of the condition was approved, we were allowing some amplifying equipment. So the application before us is to remove the ambiguity to what is the definition of event, how many times a month. So that's what this application is to just tighten up what we intended to say, all within planning law.
Thank you for that clarification. So Councillor Laming, then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. I am a bit hung up on this because it is a confrontation really between planning and licensing. So what I'd like to do is to ask the applicant on the wording of the conditions here. We've got calendar months.
Sorry, Councillor Laming. We've got the 2 public speakers just sitting there. So are there any more questions?
I'm asking them a question.
Asking the public speakers?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay.
Carry on.
So
Sorry,
it says here no more than 20 for a period of no more than 24 hours. I presume that you don't wish that, and that's more subject of a license more than anything else. Yeah.
Could you put your
No,
microphone
no,
on?
we're not going to have music for 24 hours.
Right, thank you. So that's then the people have got the chance of looking at the license. If they wish that your objectors, we can control that through the licensing. Thank you.
Sorry, councillor Cunningham and then councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Downey, the hours of operation specified for Friday and Saturday night shows 12 noon to 10 p.m. You've earlier said that you would never go beyond 9 o'clock. Would you be prepared to amend your application to 9 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock then for those 2 nights?
No, no, I wouldn't, because that means the pizza service can't go till 10 o'clock at night. At the moment, on a Thursday, I have to be shut by 8:30. So if someone sat under that building, which I really don't get, they have to be out of that building by 8:30 at night. So if you say, let's say at 9 o'clock on a Friday, Saturday night, I then have to get rid of customers out of the garden building at 9 o'clock.
So you're talking about half an hour, yeah?
So an hour. Oh, what, on the Thursday? Yeah, well, I would like to have it open later on a Thursday so people can sit in there. There's no difference whether they sit in the open building or the roof's on or off. But at the moment, the condition is we have to be shut up, lights out at 8:30 at night on a Thursday. But on a Friday, we can be open till 10 o'clock and Saturday.
Yeah, but you can still have people sitting in there at 9 o'clock without music.
Yeah.
I know, it's repeated twice.
So what I'm saying is that you stop your music at 9 o'clock, but people could still be
You
there.
would like me to put a condition in to say we stop at 9 o'clock?
The music, yes.
Could I just try and pull it back here? The amended version suggested, proposed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we've agreed, is second line, sound amplifying equipment and so on. So within the garden building. And then it says in the second paragraph, surrounding the garden building. So we are just talking about the garden building, nothing else. And the point that Mr. Downey is making is that he wants to be able to go on longer to be clear of the garden building, but we are just talking about the garden building. Am I correct here?
That's correct, Chair. When we originally allowed the garden building, we said no amplifying equipment. So you could have music in there as long as it conformed to the hours of operation, but no amplifying sound equipment or musical instruments at all under the planning regime. This application is designed to try to allow a little bit more flexibility to allow only within the building some amplified music, but only on and up to a certain number of times a year.
We'll come back to you, Councillor Cunningham, in case you want to ask more, and then I know Councillor Westwood wants to ask more questions. But my question, which is sort of related here, and I feel that the wording is confusing because it says this shall, however many times you have the event, it shall last no more than 24 hours. And you've already said you don't want 24 hours. What do you want?
We would just like to have some flexibility on the opening time of the garden building and to be able to have flexibility on having some afternoon music on a bank holiday through the summer. Maybe on a Friday afternoon, we have an acoustic musician singing out of the barn into the garden. Maybe on a Sunday afternoon, the King's coronation. We want to be able to have some music to bring customers to the cricketers, to give them a reason to come to us on these weekends, So we can have some music in the garden. That's all we're asking for.
Yeah.
With
So if I was a resident, I'd be scared by that because I was thinking, oh dear, they're going to start at 8 in the evening and go on to 8 in the morning. And that's not your intention.
no.
So
it's-
I
it's
think
never
we
been our
need to
intention.
amend that condition somehow.
Chair, that we are only recommending that there's music from that building 12 times a year because we are concerned about the amenity impacts, or 15 times a year. So it allows some flexibility through the year, but not all the time, every day, every weekend. We're really looking quite strictly at this in terms of planning amenity because we are concerned about the proximity of that building and the neighbours. So the recommendation is to allow just those 15 events. And in order to try to be precise about what does that event/time mean, we've said it can begin and end within a 24-hour period. You could have an event that perhaps lasted all weekend, maybe with one set of people that stopped and starts and stopped and started. So the event time that we are trying to specify is it can only last as long as a 24-hour period. That is one of your 15 times, but it still has to accord with your hours of opening as well. There's two slightly different definitions there, so we can be precise and enforce the condition.
I see what you're saying, but I think 24 hours, to mention 24 hours is too long, personally, but we'll come back to that. And then the other thing is, while I'm on the wording, is the log, which has to be produced upon reasonable notice. Well, what is reasonable to one person is not reasonable to another. So I would have thought that would be better to express a time limit, or I don't know, when within 2 days or whatever. What would you think would be reasonable notice, Mr. Downey? Or either of you? I'm not saying that you would take ages to hand us the log.
For us to start another event, you mean?
I'm so sorry.
So what, for us to have music and then before we can start another day of music, do you mean?
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll come
Sorry,
back.
could I just interject? If when we had the residents meeting back in December, we had a list of wants and pleases that we could write down and the proposals that we went for them. And along with toilet inspections on the night of the events and stuff, we were going to do 45-minute to an hour and a half readings of noise and record it with a meter and have it just on a simple log sheet like we would do a toilet inspection from all staff. That would be available at the end of the night if needed. We're not too high tech. It would be biro written on a clipboard, but it will be there. But
What we're trying to do, gentlemen,
No,
is to give you flexibility, but also to protect the local resident.
Of course,
you know.
I've already got the system in place with a logbook and things to record when we have music.
So
We don't.
anyway, but we'll debate that among ourselves. So I'll go back to Councillor Cunningham to see if he's finished,
No, not just quite yet.
and then Councillor Westwood.
I'm going to, sorry, can I continue, Chair? Chair, I haven't finished,
Oh, you haven't
No, I
finished? I'm sorry, I heard the opposite.
not just yet.
Right, Councillor Cunningham.
No, the residents are rightfully concerned about the noise that will be coming to them during the day and in the evening. The difference between the daytime and the evening is quite a big difference because the difference between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night is a lot more intrusive than between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the evening is when people and kids are in bed. So I give you the opportunity again to amend the timing from Fridays and Saturdays from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. of music, but continue the use of the actual garden room itself.
And Councillor Cunningham, we're still talking about the garden building?
Yes.
Okay, so music off at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
But the garden building. Okay, and on a Thursday night. Well, yeah. Okay, nine o'clock's fine by me.
That's agreed there.
Councillor Westwood, and then I think Marge wants to say something. So Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And this does relate to the garden building, and it is a question too. So first of all, I just want to be clear on where the amplifiers and speakers will sit. Are you saying they will be inside the garden building or outside of the garden building? Because I agree with you, it's ambiguous in the way it's written down here. So where will they physically be?
They'll be sat at where the front of the building is.
So you're
So
saying,
where it opens up onto the garden.
okay, but will they be inside or outside of the garden building?
It'll be inside the building.
They'll be inside, so there'll be no amplifiers or speakers outside of the garden building.
No, not on the it'll be inside the building.
I understand they'll
Onto
be on the
garden.
open side of the inside of the building,
Yeah.
but they'll be inside the building.
It'll be inside the building, and the speakers will be inside the building, on probably facing onto the garden.
Yep, no, I understand that. And the reason I asked that question is on page 135, bottom sentence. It's talking about no other time the use of sound amplifying equipment or musical instruments permitted within the garden building or in the area surrounding the garden building. So I think what you're saying to me is that all the activity will take place inside the garden building. Yeah, so what I'm trying to get to is I want to understand whether you're going to have people amplifiers or speakers outside of that garden building, but they will be inside, is what you're saying to me. Right. Okay. I understand that, and my comment to the case officer then is that perhaps the wording should reflect that clearly. I have a second question, and that concerns your comments about the noise readings you just told us about. Where will you take those noise readings? Will you take them in the garden or next to the nearest residential house or on the borders of the pub grounds? Where will they be taken?
We would have fixed points around the barn, say 4 or 5 fixed points on an A4 sheet of paper that were going to be recorded with a time date stamp against it and then put back into the normal pub reports and stuff.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, you've obviously spoken to the residents and you've discussed the events. Have you discussed any mechanism for them giving you feedback during the events should they feel that the noise is overly intrusive?
Took contact details of everyone attended and we've kept them on an email chain of what's proposed.
Yeah, that's not really the answer to my question. My question is, if I was a resident in a nearby property and I felt that the music at that point in time was too loud or too late for that, too loud for that time of day, is there a mechanism, a phone number, a way that resident's been told that they can contact you to tell you that at that point in time?
Yeah, there is.
Which is?
Our pub line. They can phone the pub, speak to either myself or the general manager.
Okay, and do you have a mechanism for recording that? A process, if you like, that is aligned to the log that we've talked about?
We have a log, but we've never recorded it, no.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Archibald.
Sorry, I don't want to prolong it too long. I am the ward councillor. Could you just explain what size this speaker is going to be? There's nothing mentioned in here.
I can't know because I don't know how. I'm not in a band and I don't know who brings. I don't own acoustic music, so but they're just normal. If there's an acoustic singer, they turn up with 2 speakers. They fit them. So I don't know how big they are. No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to draw a halt now because you've been through the mill with these questions. So I'm going to let you go back to your seats. So thank you very much for coming along today and answering our questions. So, councillors, I'm just going to look at what this application is about. And it is amending the wording of condition 3. And the wording, the original condition 3 is on page 140, and it's just 4 lines. And the proposed one is on page 141, and it's in the conditions as well. I just have a problem with some of the language, and I'm not suggesting that the gentleman here would want to go on for 24 hours, but this condition allows them to. And also, I feel that we should put a time limit on when the log should be produced if requested. So we have a suggestion, well, I think you suggested it, didn't you, Vice Chair, of within, what did you, 48 hours? 2 working days. What about that, councillors? Could we, I'm not saying that these gentlemen will be unreasonable, but I think if a log is requested, it has to be kept up to date and produced within 2 working days.
Sorry, Chair, I wanted to refer back to the 24-hour business. Is that possible? 24-hour period that you mentioned?
No, 2 working days. So it's 48 hours, that is.
Chair,
I'm just asking your opinion or what you will agree
our
with.
job to rewrite an application?
Pardon?
Is it our job to rewrite an application?
I didn't hear.
Well, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
If we're not going to agree, then I'm going to suggest we leave it.
Could I just ask, Chair, would the log contain, as Councillor Western suggested, an audio log? Because if customers are going to, if residents are going to communicate with the pub with their concerns, that should be recorded.
So it's the phrase "upon reasonable notice" I'm wanting to amend. If I have a seconder.
2 working days.
2 working days. Can I have the agreement of the committee to change upon reasonable notice to within 2 working days? Well, I think I've got a majority, even if not all of you voted. And then there is the each time shall last no more than 24 hours. I'm sure no one in their wildest dreams would want to do something for 24 hours, but
To explain.
no, I just took the easiest one first.
Why don't we go through the whole petition?
Chairman, with your permission, I've obviously sat back and been listening to members' questions and know the concerns around condition 3. How about if I read out to you my suggestions and then the committee can take a view on this. So on condition 3, as proposed on page 143, we say sound amplifying equipment and musical instruments can only be installed or used within the garden building, and we're obviously taking out or fixed to an elevation, a maximum of 15 times a year. And then we go on to say this shall comprise no more than 2 days within the same calendar month. And then we take out, and each time shall last no more than 24 hours. So then it would read, this shall comprise no more than 2 days within the same calendar month, and for a duration compliant with the hours of operation specified in condition 2 above. And then that allows the garden room to be used Monday to Thursday, midday to 8:30, Friday, Saturday, midday to 10, and Sunday, midday till 8 p.m. And then, as you say, going on then to the 3rd bullet point in that condition, that we, as you've had the motion seconded, that we say that the register shall be produced to the local planning authority normally within 2 working days.
Yeah, normally. Yeah. Councillors, are you agreeing to what Julie has just read out?
Agreed, but Councillor
Yes, is that agreement?
Councillor, I actually
I'm taking it.
Julie said 10 PM on Tuesday, on Friday, Saturday night, and I agreed with Mr. Downey for 9 PM.
No, that's the use of the garden room, not the playing of music.
Absolutely, use the garden room till 10 PM, but music until 9 PM.
Chairman, I just don't think that's reasonable. They already have planning permission with condition 2 to enable them to use the building Monday to Thursday till 8:30, Friday, Saturday till 10, and Sunday till 8 o'clock. And I think anything separate from that would be taking away a right that we've already convened in an earlier planning permission by virtue of the last consent. That would be my advice to you, Chair, that you shouldn't really try and retrospectively claw something back that's already been given, Chair. But, you know, we maybe could hear from our legal advisor if members aren't happy with that advice.
Agreed or not? Okay,
Agreed.
all done.
Thank you.
So for the bewildered members of the public, it's because there is a licensing system and a planning system. And that's what we're sort of trying to sort out. So the licensing gives permission for the activity to take place, but the planning condition says when it can take place. I think that's it in a nutshell, really.
Okay, Chair, I'll conform with that, but I think the applicant has heard our concerns about the timings.
So, oh, Marge, did you want to say something, or have you? Yeah, okay. So this application is recommended.
We haven't even been through questions.
Well, I just said ask Marge if she wants to say something, and you said
No.
no. I thought.
No.
Right, Marge, would you like to say something to the assembled people here? Sorry?
Questions from public speaking.
Yeah, and is there, right, okay. Questions from councillors? Apart from the ones we've already had.
On the whole report?
On
the whole report?
On the whole report. Well, on the whole report, but we're only really looking at condition 3. Previous and the proposed.
Shall we go to debate?
Yes. Debate. Councillor Rutter, Councillor Westwood, Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a very simple question here. The pub is simply asking to be allowed to play music up to 3 more times in a year. And the maximum at the moment they can have is 12 times a year of music, live music or recorded music in the garden. And they're asking for it to go possibly up to 15 as a maximum. And that's all they're asking for. So I don't know why we're making such a meal of it. They've also voluntarily said that they won't, it's very unlikely that the music in the garden will go on past 9 PM, even if they're allowed to. And on Mondays to Thursdays, it wouldn't be past 8:30, and on Sundays, it wouldn't be past 8 o'clock anyway. But we're not talking about every day of the week. We're talking about up to 15 times in a year and no more than twice in a month. And that's if they have 2 days together, that's their entire entitlement for that month. So really, I don't see that it's an issue. They're looking at acoustic music mostly, instruments playing in the garden. I can't imagine that people would enjoy having very loud music being played in the garden anyway. So I really don't think it's going to be a problem for residents. And I know that if it's unduly loud, the Environmental Health Department will close them down anyway. Really, the problems are outside this application. So the problems are, it's really popular, it's really successful, it's a really great pub that people want to go to. And unfortunately, they're having a bit of trouble managing where people park locally. And that's up to all of us and everybody else who uses the pub to be a bit more responsible about where we leave our cars when we go to the pub. But that's not the pub's fault. It's a problem of their own success. So I'm going to applaud their attempts to find alternative parking areas, and please do continue to do that. I'm applauding their initiative and their desire to create something that everybody wants to go to, which they've clearly done. I'm applauding their success in that area. I'm encouraging them to carry on talking to their local residents. The last thing you want is annoyed local residents. And I'm encouraging the residents to go to the pub. From my point of view, there's absolutely no question here. It's going to make life easier administratively all round if they don't have to keep making specific applications. They were allowed up to 12 temporary licenses. Now they'd be allowed up to 15 temporary licenses effectively, but they won't have to go through the process every time. And they'll keep a log, so we'll know that they're not doing more than they're allowed. So I think it's great. Carry on, lads. Thank you.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. And Councillor Rutter has summarised most of what I was going to say anyway, in that you do have a successful business there, and long may it continue. With this specific request and planning request here today, I don't have an issue with it at all. But what I will add to that is that as I sit on the licensing committee for this council as well, I'm well aware of the licensing regulations and regulations around causing public nuisance and so on. There is more than enough rules, regulations and legislation in place to regulate any noise that may be made through the activity that does impact the local residents. And I agree with you, Councillor Rutter, that the recourse through the environmental health officers and back to the licensing committee will be the route that will be taken to manage and enforce any problems that do exist. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Laming.
Yes, I'd just like to add to that this is really about the use of the building. The music comes under the licensing committee, and if the residents find it obtrusive, they have the option to actually put an objection into the licensing committee. All we're looking at today is the use of the building for this very successful business, which to a certain extent needs to be encouraged. The parking is an issue which needs to be addressed, but I think that the applicant is taking a responsible attitude with most of it. So therefore, if there is a problem with the music, they have a right to a peaceful existence, and the right way to go ahead on this is through the licensing committee, which has the right teeth to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Well, I've never heard of a series of statements before with complete disregard for the people in the community in which this building is established. We're talking about amplified sound within effectively a three-wall building, basically like a carport with a kitchen at one end. And it's shown quite clearly in the photographs that have been presented on this occasion. I have no objection to live music per se. It's the amplified sound in this location I just can't go along. And so I don't see anything wrong with the original conditions. As stated, it allows them to have music, no sound amplifying equipment. That's what I agree with. I disagree with the modification here. It's not our job to rewrite an application, and yet that seems to be what the process we're doing. This should have been on the table of the licensing committee, not the planning committee. I'm sorry, I just can't go along with you, Marge, on this one.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I was concerned about this particular application, so I actually did go out there to look at the site. I was trying to remember from long, long ago what it was like. Photographs are deceiving because that looks a very open and very spacious. It's not. It is quite small and tiny in some respects. The fact that the landscaping has not been carried out at this point in time was something I did notice. But the use of the building, I think the use of the building is going to be fine. No problem at all. My problem, unfortunately, is the same as Councillor Pearson's. It's the local residents. And if you look at a map and see where the local residents actually reside, it is exceedingly close to this. This runs on a reasonably busy road. It's on a bit of a bend with a intersection. Anyone who's driving past, if he hears loud music, they will look automatically as to what's actually happening, which puts them in a rather awkward position when they come to that road junction. Amplified music is a concern. After dark or after 8 o'clock, sound travels much, much further. If you want to reside as a local resident in your garden or in your house, have your windows open to cool down, assuming we're going to get a summer. So that's something they're not going to be able to do very easily if the music is amplified to to some noise. There is a noise element to it, which is environmental, and we have a team that will run that, and they will come in to support or otherwise judge that amplified music. But the word amplified does frighten me a little bit, and I think that is what's happened to the local residents. It's actually frightened them. They don't know what's going to happen. I agree, it's 3 extra events, and it does take out a lot of the paperwork. You don't have to apply for the temporary license. But making a meal out of it is unfortunately looking after the residents in the locality. And I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to support the officer's recommendation. In fact, if this had come up earlier, I think a deferral or a withdrawal until they got the whole thing sorted out. It seems to have been a little bit of a unfortunate.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid not afraid, I'm going to agree with Councillor Pearson and Councillor Reid on this one. Being the ward councillor, I'm in the area a lot. I drove past the pub on Sunday. Cars were parked on the verge at the bus stop. Yesterday afternoon, where you think it'd be nice and quiet, the car park was full. Yesterday about 2:30, 3 o'clock, completely full up. I know we should be supporting local businesses, but if we're now going to have music on top of this, I am concerned for the local residents where people are going to park. So unfortunately, I'm not going to support the application. Sorry.
Thank you. Are we done? I am going to vote in favour of approving this application. We were only looking at condition 3, amendments to condition 3. There were 2 phrases that I wasn't happy with, and we've altered those, and so I don't need to repeat those, but those are what you would be agreeing to if you vote in favour of this. I think we've given it a very fair hearing. We've gone down avenues that probably we shouldn't have. All I can say to residents is that you are not satisfied that what we are about to perhaps grant is not to your wishes. You can contact the environmental health regarding the noise issue, and they will come out and monitor the noise. Please keep a log of, the times when you feel it unacceptable. So this application has been recommended for approval. All those in favour, please show.
6, Chair.
And those against?
3, Chair.
So that application is approved. And that brings us, does it, to a close for the meeting? No, have we got one more? No, we've got one more, of course. We're changing officers, so we'll allow a bit of time to do that. Thank you, Marge. $4 o'clock. I want to lie down off.
Yeah. This is the test.
We are, yes. Oh, no, Lorna's not back, but all the members of the public are back, are they? Yeah. Okay, we'll just wait for Lorna and then we'll start. So we come to the final item of the afternoon, agenda item 12, 23/00011/HOU. This is a single story rear extension with amended description and plans and at Merion, Gordon Road, Curdridge. The case officer is Cameron Finch. So when you're ready, Cameron, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, we have the location plan with the site outlined in red and showing neighbouring development. We then have the aerial photograph. The site is indicated there within the line. This just gives a better context of what's around it, the semi-rural character of the area. So here we have a proposed block plan. So the area of development is hatched in red, so that comprises the single-storey rear extension. Also within that hatched line is just the area of the existing building, which is gaining a higher parapet. So we have the existing elevations of the house here. So you can see where it's been extended 2 stories to the rear, and then there's just the small single-storey offshoot there. And this is in line with the attached dwelling Chrysler Cottage. And then we have the proposed elevations of the single story rear extension, and also just showing on the western elevation there where the parapet is rising above the current extension. It's measuring approximately 3 meters in length and then 2.85 meters in height. So here we have the existing floor plans. And then the proposed floor plans shows the rear extension and also shows the roof of the rear extension with the roof lantern. That's the block plan again. So now we have a site photograph from it within the rear garden of the dwelling. So to note here, that gives a clear view of the extension that's already been carried out, the 2-story extension attached to the neighbouring dwelling, which is the same extension. And then just slightly closer to where the proposed rear extension would sit. So here we have an image from the rear garden of Two Myrtle Cottage, which is to the west. And then a photograph looking towards where the extension would sit from the immediate rear of that dwelling. And then a photograph from the rear on the other side from Chrysler Cottage, looking directly at the side of the extension. And then this is just a street view, just to show the rear extension proposed here would be behind the house. It's very well screened. And that concludes the presentation. Recommendation is to permit.
Thank you very much. We have several public speakers. The first public speakers are Amy and Tim Barker. Good afternoon. Sorry you've had to wait so long. And you both have a microphone, so if you're both going to speak, okay. So if you'd like to press the button at the bottom, and when you start speaking, you have 3 minutes, and you'll see on the screen behind you the countdown of the 3 minutes. And then if you want to join in the answers to the questions, Mrs. Barker, you are of course free to do so.
The height of the roof line at the end of Merrion near the adjoining property is 2.15 meters. There's already a step drop of 15 centimeters when you exit the back room onto the patio of both properties. The height of the proposed roof is 2.85 meters, which is an increase in roof height of 25.6%. This does not include the lantern height, and this is seen in the first picture that we sent in. This creates an 8-foot interior ceiling height. In order to achieve this height, the new roof design is cut back into the current sloping roof much higher up and further back. The plans do not accurately show the height and size in relation to the neighbours and therefore the impact on them. One person I showed the plans to said to me, "What's the problem? It's a single story extension coming out at the same height as what is there now." But as you will see from our picture just here, which is held up at the tape measure of the proposed height, it is not the case at all that it comes out the same. These back gardens face almost due south, not southwest, as the plans seem to indicate. The shadowing and closing of next door's patio area will be significant from midday onwards. The lighting of the patio doors, which are the main source of natural light to their sitting room, will be significantly reduced by a brick wall 9 foot 4 inches high and an additional roof lantern on top of unknown dimensions. The pictures clearly show the potential impact on the burden's home and life will be significant and bad. Similarly, the proposed height and length of 3.8 meters of an extension which is less than 3 feet from our boundary and a further 3 feet from our home, it will detrimentally affect a third of the length of our garden, our entire patio and light into our sitting room. We request a BRE assessment to fully appreciate the potential impacts. The land of Merrion and its neighbours slopes down into the garden, therefore the height of any extension will be much more prominent further down the garden. The solution which would allow for Mr. Willington to have his extra living space with less impact on and likely no objections from his neighbours would be to make the height of the new extension no higher than where the current sloping roof ends. This would mean that the height would be 2.15 metres as it currently is rather than 2.85 metres as in the plans. It would mean that the brick wall facing the Burdens would be 0.45 metres above the existing fence line, not 1.15 metres. So the impact on lighting of the sitting room would be reduced. With a 30-centimetre step down, as is already in the plans, or possibly a little more, the ceiling height could be the same as in other rooms of their house. A parapet wall has also been added to the existing sloping roof on the side facing our property. It raises the height of the roof even more to us, and I ask that this, and possibly the 2 additional large windows very close to our boundary, be removed from the plans. The second concern is the effect of the large lantern roof light on the bat population. I have on my phone a video of a bat which entered our house accidentally. Bats are a common sight. They use the gap between the Burdens and the next door as a commuting route between woodlands. Bats are particularly affected by horizontal light as would emit from a roof lantern. This extension would be a sitting room, so the light pollution would be frequent and for a long duration. The Bat Preservation Society notes how harmful the impact of particularly horizontal lighting like this is to bats' roosting, feeding, commuting habits and habitats. So is that time up? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Have you finished?
No, there's one final paragraph.
Right. Do say your last thing,
Yeah,
because there's discrepancy between.
It's very brief.
On here, there's 347.
It says, in summary, as long as an ecological survey does not show adverse impacts on local wildlife, a BRE assessment is undertaken to ensure the impact on light is acceptable, and the height of the proposal is 2.15 metres, i.e. starting but the same height as the existing single storey that's there, with no parapet wall as opposed to 2.85 metres, we would consider this an acceptable compromise.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So don't go away, because there could be questions of clarification for you from the committee. Are there? Councillor Reid.
Sorry, Chairman, it's me being totally confused. It's a length of day, I think. The photograph that's up there on the screen now.
Yep.
That is your house?
No, this is the Burdens house, which is adjoined. So there are 2 semis that are joined to each other.
Yeah.
And that tape measure is to the height that the brick wall would be, that would overshadow their patio. You can see it's literally, it would be hard up next to that is the boundary where the tape measure's held, and the roof lantern light, and there's no dimensions given for that, so that could be any size at all, is in addition to that height.
Okay, I'm having trouble with shadows, but I'll ask the officer later. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Edwards.
Chair. It appears from the photographs we have that the ground slopes downwards away from the houses. Yeah. Could you give an indication of how much lower the southern, I think I'm right, the southernmost end of the new building would be than the end of the existing house?
The patio that you can see there, the Burdens house, which I think is the same next door, is 15 centimetres, 6 inches below their floor height. In their diagram of the plans, they've got a drop of 1 foot, 30 centimetres from the floor, from the floor in their house currently down to the floor where it'd be. So just 6 inches below that. It slopes quite a lot lower than that. So in fact, as you come out to the end of the patio, and if you came out to the end of the extension as is proposed, there'd then be a big drop down. So there's plenty of scope for, instead of having a 30 centimetre drop, having a 45 centimetre drop. Don't have a 8 foot high ceiling, have a normal height ceiling, and the impact on the both sets of neighbours are dramatically reduced from that. The light impact and enjoyment of life and shadowing effect, enclosing effect of I'd say the 9'4" high brick wall next to the Burdens is particularly impactful, I feel.
Comment to that. The Burdens, at the end of the brick wall there that you can see on the edge of the photograph, that's the end of their patio. From that point, there's a very sharp drop. And if I had to guess, I'd say about 3 feet. It's a very sharp drop into their garden.
1 meter.
It's 1 meter.
That's right.
So it's they do slope down quite a bit.
So what we ask is an extension to be done in sympathy for the neighbours, which has, there's great scope for there being an extension with greatly reduced impact on the neighbours. Whereas 8 foot high ceiling, coming out 3.8 metres with a big tall lantern light on top has great impact on the neighbours. And so I feel there's compromise where both parties can get what they want here. Compromise on our part of accepting an extension, having already had a huge extension done 17 years ago, but another extension, we accept this and they get what they need, but without such great impact on us.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, so thank you very much indeed for coming along today. And then the supporter, Hessel Willemsen, unfortunately his wife, we went on so long that his wife's had to go and collect the children from school.
Madam Chair, I have really nothing much to say other than to introduce myself, that we are the applicants. We
Do you think you could move the microphone just slightly nearer?
a little closer. Yes, that better. And we made an application for this modest, I think, extension that we would like for a maturing family. That's really what we are doing. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming along, and I'm sorry you've had such a long wait. How many steps are there down? I can see from the plans that there are steps down from the end of the existing extension into the proposed new extension. How much further down is it at the moment planned to be? And is the roof really going to be 8 feet? Are the walls really going to be 8 feet high?
Well, they are what they are on the planning as we have submitted them through the architect. I'm very sorry that I am not such a technical mind that I can answer all such questions. I think it is going about 3 or 4 steps down. That is
3 or 4 steps.
That is my understanding from speaking with the architect.
All right. Well, I can ask the officer
please,
for
please
more
ask.
details. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Archibald.
Thank you, Chair. The neighbour mentioned about bats in the area. Have you had a bat assessment done along with the application?
I don't think we have had that assessment done, as far as I know.
Thank you, Chair.
Not open for questions. So thank you very much indeed for coming along. Cameron, would you like to amplify on the number of steps? Because the members of the audience, members of the public, or audience, not fun, weren't happy with the answer of 3 or 4.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my understanding is it is about 3 steps down from the existing from conversations with the agent. Just to emphasise, it is measured from the plans, the scale drawings that we have, it is 2.85 metres. As we know, the pictures have been circulated. We haven't been able to verify what is shown there. So our reliance is on the drawings that we have been provided, and that they are the scale drawings, and that is the height that's been provided. In terms of shadowing, we have looked at this. So the impact would potentially be late afternoon to evening sunshine. The consideration that we've given is actually in the morning, and then into the early afternoon it would be an acceptable level on that side, that dwelling to the east. And because of development that has happened within that area, we have concluded that there is some existing impact from surrounding buildings that are already there, dwellings that have been extended, or just the layout of that. So in our consideration, we've taken that into account, and actually the extension here for you, we don't consider would have an unacceptable impact in terms of shadowing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add from what you've heard in the public speaking?
That's everything from. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We move now to the report. Starts on page 163. And principle of development. Could I just ask Cameron, perhaps you, to explain why this doesn't come under DM3? So it's got an area of 120 square meters, and I thought DM3 protected such buildings, but I can't understand why it doesn't, it's not bound by the size limitations within this policy.
Thank you, Chair. So from the measurements, unfortunately, the size measurement isn't in the report. Apologies for that, but we have measured it to be above 120 square metres at the time that the plan was adopted. So it doesn't fall in under DM3. So we haven't had to put the size limitation of 25% on for this application.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Rutter? Do you want to ask a question?
I'm not sure if this comes under principle of development or a bit further on, but if you could just reassure me from the plans, it looks as if the new extension comes out at sort of the level of the guttering on the existing extension, and then comes out, and then is obviously it's a steep drop away. Is that right? I am concerned that it may appear, because of the garden slope, out of proportion really to the neighbouring properties. And I just want you to reassure me that it's not going to be unduly big at the back when you take into account the slope of the garden. So how much does it step down? And it's very difficult because I can't read the writing when I blow up my own copy of the plans. But it does look as if the wall is at the height of the top of the guttering area, or the, you know, where the roof comes down to. Is that the end, or does it come in a bit and therefore is higher than that?
Thank you, Chair. So the roof part that you can see there, as illustrated on that northwestern elevation there, the guttering that is joined onto the new parapet, so it appears slightly higher than the existing guttering. And then you can see on the proposed southeast elevation there, where it's sitting just above that. So having had due regard and been in all three of the rear gardens, and then taking into account the sort of most meaningful size of development for this kind of extension, we do consider that it is sufficiently in proportion with what's there already.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions on that area, South Downs National Park and the historic environment. And then we move on to neighbouring amenities. No questions. So sustainable transport and ecology and biodiversity. And then finally, the end of the report. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I do have a question on ecology. We've heard about bats and their prevalence locally and the potential impact on them. It says in our report that you don't think that this is going to be sufficiently important to affect the bats. Can you just explain that a little bit more, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Because the roof lantern is in an area which is already concentrated in residential development, there's expected to be slight light spill coming out of buildings as existing. So we've taken that into account. It's not an isolated, or it wouldn't be an isolated feature. There would already be limited amount of light in that area permeating out of residential buildings. So in that way, we found it to be acceptable.
Okay, Councillor Otter.
Yes, I was just double checking how far outside the national park it is, because of course they've got a night skies policy, but it's quite a long way away, isn't it? So that doesn't affect that either, does it? No. Okay, thank you.
Right, so we go to the end of the report and the conditions. Debate? Councillor Rutter, followed by Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. I am a bit concerned actually that the neighbours have got a point. Because the gardens, as I can see from the photographs, they do slope considerably down at the back. But our officers have visited the site, they've got the plans, they've got all the dimensions, they're quite confident that actually it's not unduly high at the back. And I'm afraid we have to listen to our officers, and their advice is that it's appropriate, and stepping down into the garden and should have no more impact than is reasonable. And in a built up small terrace where you're all quite close together, any sort of extension is going to have a little bit of impact on you. So bearing all that in mind and balancing the views, I think that there are no real planning reasons why we could turn this down. So I won't be going against the officer recommendation, but I would ask the applicant to perhaps have another look at perhaps going down another couple of steps into his new extension, having a word with the architects and seeing if you can just lower it slightly, just out of consideration for your neighbours, because I think just a bit of a drop in the height of those walls that abut your neighbours will make quite a difference to them. So I would simply say that, but other than that, I will support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. Following Jane again, I'm really echoing your comments in that I do have a concern around the height of this particular extension. I understand you've been to the site and seen it, but it does seem to me that it appears from the photos that we've seen and the plans that I've got in front of me that it will seem quite tall. If you're standing either side in either property, either side, it will impact clearly the light going in. And if we look at DM17 and it's 0.7, I think that the development does not have an unacceptable adverse impact on adjoining land, and it's really subjective. And I really struggle with that actually in this particular case, whether it's it is adverse, unacceptably adverse, but there's definitely an adverse element to it for the neighbours either side. And again, I echo Councillor Rutter's comments that I would ask you to review what you're proposing and the impact that it has on your neighbours either side. You have to live with them, and it would be great if you can come to a solution that meets your needs and respects the views of the neighbours either side, so that having built it, it'll be a great place to live in.
Thank you. Councillor Lamy.
Yes, I concur with Councillor Westwood on this. I think there needs to be a little bit of adjustment on this to make sure that it's acceptable to the neighbours as well, because it is rather high and it could be considered to be overdevelopment on this. So therefore, I don't see how I can support it.
Thank you. Any further contributions? This site is very tight, but if you look at page 166 and the planning balance and conclusion, it does concur with so many policies that I can't see a material planning reason to refuse it. You can't see it from the street, and it is, as it says, modestly sized and won't have an impact on neighbouring dwellings. So I really can't see, although I understand that the immediate neighbours are not happy about it, I can't see a reason to refuse it, material planning reason. So unless there's any further contribution, this application has been recommended for approval. The update of condition 2 to include an amended block plan, which was submitted after the other amended plans. So all those in favour of approving this application, please show. And those against?
2, Chair.
And that makes 9, that's what we are. So that application is approved. Thank you very much. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you. I just would like to say please feel free to stay or go. I've already said thank you to the members. This is my last meeting after 28 years on the planning committee. And I would just like to restate, and they know how I feel about them, my thanks to the officers